Welcome to the podcast Studio Stijn, Inspiring Leadership. I learned in my life the importance of being inspired by others and to be surrounded by people who bring you new insights and perspectives. That is the way to grow as a leader and human being in challenging and changing times. In these podcast series, I bring you the latest innovations on personal development and leadership told from business managers, CEOs, spiritual leaders, and people who live their true story. And I am your host, Stijn Staes, executive coach and absolutely addicted to podcast making. And today my guest is Lars Sudmann. I'm very pleased to have you on the show today, Lars. And Lars and I got acquainted after that he saw me on stage at Supernova. We got connected and here we are, Lars. What a beautiful way to start a podcast, isn't it?
It is great to be here. Thanks a lot, Stan.
So let me introduce you, Lars, to the audience. And I must say, it is quite your CV, your curriculum is quite impressive. So let's just start with it. Lars is an executive advisor, an author, and keynote speaker on leadership innovation, strategy, and digital transformation. He is a senior fellow and council director at the global think tank, the Conference Board, and has been featured on Forbes, BBC Capital, Fast Company, the Chicago Tribune, and many more. His TEDx talks are top ranked with more than 2 million views, and his latest book is Innovation That Sticks. He has worked with Fortune 500 companies such as Microsoft, Vodafone, SAP, Siemens, and many more to help companies and teams achieve better business and organizational results. And why I invited Lars to this podcast is also because he spends his time analyzing what makes business and individuals successful. For instance, as he does that, a leadership lecturer at leading universities in business schools in Germany and Belgium. So he also frequently shares these insights at conferences in Europe, the USA, the Gulf region, and Asia. And Lars is a 6-time Belgian and 2 times European champion of public speaking. You are truly a world traveler, Lars, and I'm so happy and so pleased to have you on the show because in this podcast, maybe the audience might have guessed, but we will dive into topics of self leadership, self development, and why it is so important to master yourself and to get to know yourself on a deeper level. What does that bring you? And how one can become successful and stay true to oneself without damaging others. And that is quite some topic these days. And I'm also very curious how you have become such a beautiful public speaker, Lars. So welcome again.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for that introduction. Thanks a lot, Stan.
So let's start maybe, Lars, with your past, your history. Where do you come from, and how did you become a successful executive advisor? Where have you been all over?
Okay, I'm German. Grew up in Germany, studied in Germany as well. Started also my first professional career steps in Germany. I studied business administration at first, and always had the dream of during that time of consulting as well. So I joined briefly also consulting. I joined McKinsey and Company, but very soon realized I really want to work in the business more. So joined another company after my studies, Procter and Gamble, which some of you might know. I always bet everybody will have touched one of the products in the lifetime, like from all the Pampers and Ariel and
Yeah.
so I worked first in Germany in a plant environment, and then I moved to Belgium, where I had a role that is still very close to my heart. I became head of strategy for dishwashing liquid, head of financial strategy as well. So I learned a lot about dishwashing during that time, but also it's very, very, very big. Yeah, whenever I share that with people, they have that excitement in the eyes, so to speak. But it is a very.
How can that be interesting? Can you share a little detail that nobody knows about dishwashing?
Oh yeah, I mean, very very simply, and it's the world is divided by dishwashing, so to speak. I mean, very 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 brief. There's 2 methods in the world. I mean, roughly way to divide it, and lots of sub methods. Some people put the plug in let the water in and put a bit of dishwashing in there, like most of Belgians, and then they do their dishes, hand dishing and so
Yeah.
on. Some people take a sponge, put some stuff on it, let the water run, and do this here. Now, this is like two methods in the world, and countries are divided by that, almost like
Oh,
what of
wow.
Spain and so on. Yeah. And how do you do the dishes if you do the dishes? Let's do first
The
one.
first suggestion that
Yes,
you made. Yeah.
exactly. Now, just imagine what was your reaction that came to mind when you hear the second one.
Well, I would say it's very you will spoil a lot of water
Exactly, you
and
spoil a
products.
lot of water, and so and the reaction for the people when they hear what you're doing and what I do as well, and they're like, "Ooh, that's really like a lot of stuff in it," and it shows you already how that can be interesting. I still remember during my Erasmus studies, I was doing dishes together with somebody with two others from the mess, and we were always getting into an intercultural fight. Like, no, you can't do it like that. No, you can't do it like that. So it's very interesting. Actually, you can see the a lot of cultural conflicts in the world come from some easy habits such as dishwashing. Can be very, very interesting. But it was business-wise, it was also extremely interesting position. P&G is a great company, highly successful um, uh, business unit as well, if you believe it or not. It's a very,
Mm.
very interesting product, and I learned a lot of things also in terms of leadership because I came into that role, and it was a global role where lots of coordination was be done with
Mm.
all different kinds of other regions, thinking about the future of this one. Again, $3 billion turnover of this business unit alone, so it's a rather big with rather big entity, believe it or not, with dishwashing. But
Mm.
it was very interesting times to
Yeah.
see about cross cultural work, international work, working with people where you don't have a direct reporting line, but still have to influence.
Mm.
And so on. It was a very, very fascinating time.
What made you leave the corporate world?
Yeah, I did a couple of other roles afterwards as well. Worked in post-merger integration. I was CFO here for Belgium, chief country finance manager here, and at some stage, I always had this. I did an exercise back in I think early 2000s of really reflecting about like what are some of the life goals career wise in general and so on. And
Mm.
one of them was really well doing experiencing something in the corporate world, achieving some roles in the corporate world, but also starting something on my own
Mm.
and really and really that fascination of words of working with people with individuals and always had in my mind at least like always that dual interest. One is like really working with numbers and how fun. That's why I worked also in finance a lot and strategy, but also always the focus on individuals and people. So and already in my master thesis and so on I tried to combine the two and really thought like I had fantastic times in the business world, also in leadership roles and executive roles, really driving things forward. I had a very interesting time. I was country finance manager in the during the financial crisis from 2008 to 2010. So that was very turbulent, very interesting times there as well. So that was extremely interesting. But I always really also liked like this, developing individuals, thinking about how can we individually be better, working with people, working with teams, and
Mm.
so on. So I gave myself a try and said like, okay, why not? I mean, it would have been also time for a major move to leave then here, the Belgium, to maybe go to the US or to Switzerland or some other place. And I thought like, why not give it a time of this life goal of, I time boxed it for myself for 18 months, give it a try. Can this work going out on your own? Did a couple of things and so on before as well during the time. So there was lots of indications that it might, that's really something that I enjoy. So I made the jump and start something on my own, which was also like a big thing on my life goal list. And well,
When was that you became an independent
2012.
advisor?
12, yeah.
T- How was that jump?
It was a very fascinating, great jump, a very interesting jump, very curious because like very fast afterwards, I met some of the colleagues and so on, and some assignments directly afterwards after the jump. So it was interesting to see like being out of the corporate world again, and then directly working a couple of
Mm.
months later with the individuals. Then again, no, but it was a great jump. I did in the years before. I always did a couple of tests, balloons, and so on. I gave myself a couple of set of metrics that I wanted to be
Mm.
true. I did a sabbatical as well sometime before where I tried out a couple of things, and so I was fairly because I hit a couple of metrics that I set for myself, like a certain audience feedback, a certain
Mm.
reaction certain testimonials and certain things. So that I thought like, okay, already during my, during my corporate time, that I thought it might be okay, but it was always a question, like in the first year, of course, like, hey, well,
Mm.
is somebody, how do I work now best with people? Yeah, so that was an exciting jump, interesting times, and looking back, it was a fascinating time. Yeah.
Yeah, looking back, because a lot of the audience are founders or freelancers or independent people, managers, or just starting up a company. What would you say in your experience, from your own experience, and probably also from companies that you have coached and that you've worked with, are the main success factors for a successful business and becoming great at what you do,
As an individual or as a company?
as an individual for yourself?
As an individual, I'm a I'm a big fan of, well, it's always unique, and I think it's always it's always I think everybody has a unique journey. However, I do think there's a couple of key things that I
Mm,
recommend to people, that I try to look at myself, and I really think I'm a big fan of sometimes these, let's call it stacking, or Venn diagram overlaps, and I really
yeah.
like how Ken Robinson had sometimes framed it, like, I think you have to know what your element is if you work on something, like what you might be truly good at,
Hmm.
and what you enjoy doing. And if these two come together, and very often people think like, well, that's isn't that the same? And I think it's not the same. It's like truly good at, like, compare. How do you know? Well, and I always define this like, okay, maybe in the top 10% versus others. And how do you find this out? By trying out a lot of things early in life and so on. But really, then at some stage, I think everybody gets maybe some feedback and say, wow, that was really unique. That was interesting and so on. And then you have something. And if you then enjoy that on top and spend some time on it, become really, truly, uniquely you, I think if everybody before, and that in my view is true for great companies, but also for individuals who go out on a freelance journey and so on, and want to build something for themselves, is if they're truly in their element, then they can drive
Mm.
value for others, and that makes them successful, whatever metric of success there is, financially or others, and so on. And then, of course, there's a couple of other small details, like discipline and having business focus and so on. But I think like,
That's the essence.
I truly believe that is the essence,
Yeah.
because that drives you forward. Being in that, driving something there in your element.
So what is that for you? What is in the middle of the Venn diagram for you, Lars?
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. There's a couple of things probably. Um, there's truly. I've always had in my business career, but also now, I try to look at always from different angles that are sometimes maybe that people say like it's unusual to combine those. And one is that analytical frame, like the number
Mm.
focus and so on. I mean, I've worked in finance. I work with a lot of Excel trackers and so on. I track everything. Just to give you, I've tracked every client interaction in terms of and not with the client, but like, okay, how was that? And on a scale from 1 to 10, how do I think like it worked and so on, to give myself like a learning experience and so on for this. So I'm a big numbers person, but I also try to be a big people person, so to understand what truly works for another person and so on. And I always try to combine these. I mean, this is truly in my
Mm.
I'm truly in my element when I do both, like okay, one-on-one coachings and working with large groups of people, working with executive teams and so on. But I've also written, and you'll see that and so on. I've written things like some what are some metrics for leadership and so on. Where people say, like, oh yeah, but it's all about people. Yeah, but you have also a couple of input metrics, things you can push yourself in doing, number of experiments you do per week, and something like this. And I've also get very excited when I work with that. So I'm certainly in my element when working with individuals and so on, but always
Yeah.
giving like this analytical structure and so on for it. That's in
Mm.
the broad scheme. So analysis, business analysis, one-on-one work with individuals, with people, and so on. Excel, that's is also in that diagram and so on. So it's a unique thing, and now I, I try to bring that also, to people. If you watch some of my keynotes and so on, I try always to
Yeah.
combine this, like finding special situations where I think like, okay, that is working or not working in
Mm.
successful companies, but also then putting like the analytical angle and the people angle on it, and
Mm.
so.
I watch some of your TEDx movies, Lars, and even now I feel you have this vibrant energy of enthusiasm and positivism inside of you. And a quote that I remembered from one of your talks was one about Marcus Aurelius. The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. It seems you only have good thoughts. No.
No, no, that's in the conversation there as well. Not only good thoughts. No, no. There's lots of different, of course, thoughts and lots of stressful moments and so on that we have. However,
Can you
having
elaborate a little bit on that quote? Because I think you have quite an interesting view on how on mindset and thoughts in general.
well, yeah, it's from Marcus Aurelius. I'm as it's obvious from that quote, and in general, I'm a student of Stoic philosophy as well, and I do think there's a lot of value in this for especially today's life. It's very ancient thoughts and wisdom that couldn't be, in my view, timelier than today. And especially Marcus Aurelius's Meditations
Mm,
is a book that he wrote to himself, so to speak, on lessons learned, having that small job as a Roman emperor and being one of the leading voices of Stoic philosophy is I find quite fascinating. And it's meditations he wrote to them himself, and I think like that's already where we can see some powerful, thoughts. I think like Marcus Aurelius in general, as a practical person, was there, from what we know from the meditation, it was quite into self-reflection and reflecting
mm,
about things and reflecting about these things. For one of the quotes that I really like as well as like, on top of this, not only the quality of life depends on the quality of your thoughts, but also then you think like, hey, I might have difficult moments today. How will I react, so to speak? And
mm,
really think, which is a key classic Stoic philosophy type of thing, which I
mm,
try to live up as well. Like every morning, I look at it and I remind myself also on a couple of things that I've written, I've experienced for myself, and try then for difficult moments to be as prepared and try to reflect and so on about this. But always positive? No, no, not at
no.
all.
If we connect, I loved when you said when we experience a bad day or some negative emotions, it's so important how we react to it. Is that what you would describe as self leadership to get control over how we act and how we respond to things? Because there is difference between reacting and giving a response to something.
Mm-hmm.
How do you relate that to self leadership?
Um, I think if I break down self leadership, I think self
Hmm.
leadership has a couple of components to this one. I think what you're alluding to are two subcomponents of self leadership, which is
Hmm.
one is self awareness, and the other one is self awareness, self reflection, and self regulation.
Yeah.
And I think um, knowing, for instance, like, okay, going through a bad moment and so on, I'm quite a big fan of really reflecting then about this, like, okay, which, we always encounter new areas, we work with new individuals, we meet new people, and there's always like some moments that maybe didn't go as
Mm.
as we thought. I'm a big fan of, and you will always see me very often sitting one moment per the day in my one of my black books, and like just a uh, uh, um, black book for taking notes, black notebook, and really
Mm.
reflecting. Okay, so this just worked. Like, what worked well, what didn't work well, what would I do differently, and then maybe reflecting about this. Okay, if and especially if it was something remarkable, and really like, that didn't work really so well. I think like one of the self-reflection moments then is really taking this out and really, okay, if that were to happen again, how would I
Mm.
the next time? And I think that, and then I do an exercise. Then I write down on a card, and that can be very simple, like card like this, and write down. Okay, if such a situation happens again, this is how I think I would react. And I have a staple now of like quite a few of these cards because lots of things happen, but I go through them and I notice. not at all. It's perfect. But I notice like sometimes when the situation or similar situation comes again, at least like going through this one on a daily or every second day, it keeps it fresh in your mind. And then I noticed like in a couple of moments where a situation like this came again, I could react a little bit. I could regulate myself a lot more
Mm,
better. So it's a combination of subparts of self leadership for me. It's like
yeah,
this self reflection, and then really moving that into one element of
mm,
self regulation in the moment. Then
yeah. What would you say? Because it seems so easy to do, just sit a little bit, be aware of what you are thinking, and then write it down and act upon it. Yet we seem to have so much difficulties of being aware of what we think, what we actually think, and what we believe ourselves what we think. So what are for you the major components that limits us in seeing truly what we think, if that makes sense?
what limits us with seeing
So
truly what we think.
because we have some patterns in life that we just learned from school or from parents, and that
Mm-hmm.
we are not aware of,
Mm-hmm.
that we are behaving in a certain way and we think in a certain way as well. So what is it that we keep on doing these that we keep on repeating these same patterns over and over and over again?
Yeah, it's difficult to break out sometimes of some of these
Mm,
patterns. I think one of the key things in my experience that keeps us being in the same patterns, but also not realizing sometimes what is going on is that we are maybe not in reality, that sometimes we're not seeing reality and accepting reality, so to speak, what is happening. And that's why very often we have some mind constructs how things can be and should be and so on. And um, then we maybe avoid a reality check for it and continue being there, although like we hit reality.
yeah.
Let me one of the things where I realized that a lot is in recent years I've been quite involved in martial arts and martial arts competitions there as well, and there, especially
And sorry, what's that? Martial art?
in martial arts,
Ah,
yeah,
martial arts. Okay.
martial
Yeah, yeah,
arts,
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. And there also I'm trying to expose myself to competitions there as well, and that is so interesting because like you come up with all these ideas and thoughts and constructs on how you think you would behave, and then you are in a competition, in a friendly competition and so on, but you fight in a very set system with somebody, and then you really see like, well, then reality kicks in and you really need to confront you. So you need to think like, why did I win here? But also more important, the most thing you learn, like, why did I lose here at the moment? I thought everything
Mm,
was the other person here just better in my case, or was it something that I did wrong? And then really working that out. I think so. So to come back to your question, I think one of the things why we're maybe not correcting ourselves as much or not realizing is maybe not realizing when we are confronted by feedback from reality that we think like that comes from somewhere else, and not just taking a step back and say like, okay, why did that happen right now, and
yeah,
not taking the time and ask that question.
yeah.
And things like exposing yourself to reality can be very helpful for this. I mean, things like, well, competitions where sports competitions and so on, that you
Mm,
just see it as well, but also in real life. For example,
yeah.
taking up a leadership position, be it be it with an association or be it somewhere, also is a, as I always call it, is a rendezvous with reality. I mean, you can have some thoughts before, oh, wouldn't it be great if people behave and we did this? But once you're in charge, once not them, it's you realize, oh, and that is the first great moment where you're
Yeah.
confronted with reality. And I think then the key thing, and that for me is the key part of self leadership, then is also
Yeah.
taking the time, taking the 1 minute, 5 minutes per day, and reflect. Okay, why did that happen now today? And what was maybe my part in this?
I love this one. Lars, soon I will have my book launch, and I was looking for a beautiful place to organize it. And so I had visited several places, and there was one place which was this monastery. And when I entered the building, there was this lady who welcomed me. but she seemed really tired, and she was not really friendly. And so my mind already started, this is not going to work. I will not have my book launch here. I will not work with a lady who is not nice, who is not asking me questions. That. So my head completely turned into this, all these thoughts of judgment, and so I left the building, I left the monastery, and I was like, no, 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 this is not going. I will not have my podcast or my book launch in a facility where this lady is residing, which is completely absurd, because I started afterwards when I did the reflection, like you said,
mm,
I was like, but what happened here actually? I didn't even ask if the lady, then she might have been sick, she might have had a headache, or she might have had just an argument with her boss, or whatever caused her to be not very friendly. But how it influenced me to take a decision
mm,
which was not in my own interest.
mm, mm,
And that I love, and I see that with a lot of people that I work with as well, is that you often make decisions not in the interest of the business, or for your higher purpose, but in the interest of your own hurt, yeah, for your own ego, your own little grumpy man that is a little bit sad or a little bit mad.
yeah, and I think, like, I would say, doing that reflection, I think, is important, because
Yeah,
sometimes it is
absolutely.
a difficult individual, and maybe sometimes it is the right thing, and but sometimes not, and sometimes we haven't asked these questions,
Yeah.
and I mean, we always encounter, and we're always sometimes not in a good mood, or some things that work. But I think, like, the key thing in the journey of life is taking the time back and seeing, reflect, and do I need to course correct somehow? And will it always work? No. But and will we always be in that mood? No. But I think, like, if we don't take that time, uh, we just go ahead. I love what Sigi Jung
Mm.
once said on this one. The psychologist basically, he said, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will guide our lives, and we call it fate. And I really love that
Yeah.
quote. Um, and I really do think like that. That's self-reflection from time to time, and making therefore some things aware in this complex being of
Mm.
ourselves that every human is. I think that is one of the foundations for everybody in leadership, but in business
Yeah.
success, in all kinds of fields. Yeah.
Absolutely. Another quote that you mentioned as well is one of D. Hawk, the CEO of Visa. You remember that one?
Yeah. If you want to lead others, invest at least 40% in leading yourself. I love that. I mean, being a numbers person, I love that he was so specific. Unfortunately, I can't ask him anymore, like where he, what the study exactly, his self study was on the 40% type of thing. But I really
Yeah.
love this.
I wonder. That's why I'm asking you. What does 40% mean? Because when you tell that to people, well, when should I eat? When do I sleep if I have to spend 40% on leading myself?
Yeah, I, I think I did some digging into this one as well, and um, uh, I think it's a self-observation study and so on, and it's not
Mm.
40% of the 24 hours of the day, and so to speak. My interpretation of this one is like 40% of the time that you spend in general, that you spend on developing people, spend also the time on developing yourself. And I think, like, especially if you lead, there's this concept of the shadow, of the leadership shadow, like the way you lead, the way you interact, and especially for people who lead in large organizations. Like, yes, you have your direct reports, the people you interact daily with, but that also all of your behavior that transmits down, and so to speak. So I think, like,
Mm.
and I see that very often with general managers, CEOs, and so on, the way they act, the whole organization, as a shaped by that. And that's why I really do think, like, the interpretation of this one is like, wow, it's like, not only be concerned just with the business or just with the people, but try to see, like, okay, where can I be like this driving force who brings things forward in a positive way, but also where are some of the, it's got more negative behaviors that we might have. And the more
Mm.
exposed we are, I think two things happen. Like, all the more difficult stuff we will encounter, the more challenges will come, the more problems will be brought ourselves. So we'll have this constant exploration. And if we then behave in a bad way, or in a difficult way, the bigger the impact would be. And I think that's why
Mm.
interpretation of D Hawk's areas, like, well, is like, if especially if you have a large organization, but also if you lead others in general, like, always spend a significant time on not just developing another person, but develop yourself, thinking about yourself, reflecting, training yourself, and so on. And that will have a transmitting effect also to the people
Mm.
you.
If you look at today's media, Lars, one would say our leaders don't self-reflect anymore. Is that what you see as well when you travel around the world and helping also the big companies, and is that reality, or do you see there is a change towards more conscious behavior, conscious self leadership?
I do think there is a development towards, especially in now, if we talk about in companies and entrepreneurs and so
Hmm.
on, we stay in that field of the world, so to speak. I do see definitely a trend for time for development. Is it always easy? Is it in every company? No. And
No.
do we see some sometimes, in my opinion, like very special, bad, or however label you want to give on this one, like different leadership? Yes, we do see that, and there can always be various reasons for this one. But in general, I do encounter, and every year speak in front of thousands of leaders. I work with a lot of people. I do encounter really an interest of that people really want to take the time, think about, develop themselves. Now, in today's world, if we leave the media aside, but in today's world, I mean, it's very fast paced. People are,
Yeah.
a lot of leaders work a lot, and they are really into this one, and email, everything is very fast response. What I do see though is an interest in developing leader and a growing interest. However, it's a challenge of having the time to do all this, and that's what I do to get a lot of time. Like, okay, I just don't have that feedback, like taking the time and for that reflection, for that developing of the individuals. That is, for a lot of people, that's a challenge that I hear, and I think that very often, in my perspective at least, like, leads to sometimes unwanted behaviors, because then a lot of time is spent on problems in other fields rather than things
Mm.
that could have been maybe prevented and so on before. But I mean, to answer your question,
Mm.
I, it always depends, of course, on the organization, on the individuals, and on the culture and on the country and so on. But uh, especially in our vicinity here, I do see a development that and an interest in leadership.
Mm.
Every What I do see as a common ground, like everybody I talk to, people say, like, yeah, I mean, leadership, people have to develop more leadership, better leadership. There's a consensus on this, but what that means, actually, there is maybe a different.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Mm. I love, yeah, it's very interesting how you describe, when it comes to when we don't have enough time and we're just running the daily life, and we just react, and we just react to problems. And if we aren't able to take a step back anymore, and have this self-reflection and what is really going on, you know? So what is your suggestion that so leaders can go back to a snail pace instead of this fast pace.
Yeah, I wouldn't say back to a snail pace per se, and I think in today's world, I mean, if you want to work and operate and so on, I think that's very difficult. I think what I would recommend everybody is to build in mini rituals. And just yesterday,
Mm,
I bought a book yesterday at the airport. I mean, on the research, which I'm really look forward to exploring. It's called Mini Rituals, and I'm a big
mm,
fan. But just like by going through it very fast, I immediately bought it, because it's also one of my suggestions that I really recommend every leader to do. Is like, not to say like, okay, change everything, and so that's very difficult to
no.
implement regardless where you are. But I think what everybody should implement, I get this a lot. It's like, I don't have time for all of this and I forgot it and so on. Like having these daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly
Mm,
rituals of reflection, of taking this time back, of reflecting on your goals, reflecting on your, reflecting maybe briefly every day, just basically, how was the day yesterday and what is today? what is maybe the one thing I will do today in the evening? What is one thing that went well today? With my coaching, I always ask myself, and myself as well, the question, but also others, what is, like, over the past 4 weeks, like, how would you score your leadership, so to speak? And just by reflecting this, and it doesn't have to be long, taking a step back, okay, what is the one thing that I could do differently, and so on. So having this, maybe this two, we always say, like, this 2 minutes daily self-awareness, self-reflection, and so on. And I do this also going through the various cards and lessons learned and so on that I have, just this 2-3 minutes per day. And then maybe once a week, take yourself an hour. Once a quarter, take yourself maybe 2 hours, and do a little step back,
Mm,
like building in these mini rituals. I think that is something that is, I find it extremely powerful to
yeah.
do. And that's what I think really people should be doing from time to time, really
Mm,
getting in your own helicopter.
yeah.
Take maybe, and we can have a full another conversation about also resting down, digital detox, and all these things,
Yeah.
but also in terms of self leadership, getting briefly back, reflect, just for yourself, or maybe with a spouse, or maybe with, again, a coach, or with somebody, but really taking this time back to reflect. I think that is something that can be very powerful, and then going back into the world.
Beautiful. I think that's really powerful. You know, the power of ritual every day, every week. Myself, I do a day. I have many daily routines for self-reflection. Sometimes I think a little bit too much, but
That's
uh,
always the I'm always more and more, it's like, okay, always, what's the optimum? Not doing it, maybe too much doing it, but finding your own personal optimum for it.
yeah,
It's
exactly. Because at a certain point, it's good to have many insights. And I think some people make the mistake, getting insights and insights, but you have to implement and you have to integrate your insights into the reality. That's where
absolutely,
it makes a difference. It's not
yeah.
only in your head, it doesn't make any difference.
Absolutely. And
Mm.
that can be the other extreme then, right? I mean, sometimes people are just in this whoa, 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 in this mill of doing, and then not taking it. But of course, if you're in the other mill of reflecting, and not doing, that can also be nothing. So I'm always
So,
like this, in this midfield, like, what is your personal optimum? And that's, I think, like
mm,
a constant life question for everybody, a constant
yeah,
individual one.
perfect optimal balance. Yeah, that's a really beautiful one. Thank you. So you are an excellent public speaker, Lars. How did you become so fluent in speaking? Is that a practice? Is that self-discipline? Is that self-leadership of what you dreamt of becoming a public speaker? Was this a dream of you that
No,
you
well,
envisioned?
it depends on at what age. I mean, certainly not. I had the great fortune to be a friend of mine when I was 10 years old. I think 10 years or 11, no, 10, 9 or 10, 9 years old. Invited me to become, at the time, which was on German television. He was selected to be on one of these, game shows and so on, and that was
Mm,
very big. I mean, it was like millions of people watching. It was in front of an elephant, and then there was like four teams competing with each other and so on. And I still have that recording, which looks very, very fun. And I can tell you, it was a very strange recording. I was really shaking with a microphone in the hand when the host interviewed me, and after that, he didn't really talk with me later on, because he really realized, like, that that's not such a great conversation to have there. And also in school and so on, I didn't really like public speaking so much,
mm,
per se. It became, during my studies, more interesting, because I really realized, like, okay, with the power of words and so on, you can do something, and it's a very interesting thought process to really shape your thoughts and convey them to others, and you can have a great impact with that. And I became more and more fascinated with that. And to answer your question, maybe I really started to like it in the, as of, so to speak, the second part of my studies, where I had a
mm,
couple of projects, and I was a member of a student association where I had to compete for a leadership position, and I had to give a speech about myself and convince others why to do this. And I got this in a very narrow race, and I really, really liked this. Okay, that was interesting. Like, comparing this, I was very nervous there before, but it was very interesting. Like, okay, I could convince maybe a group of people to say, oh yeah, yeah, vote in this case for him and his ideas. And I started to study that a little bit more, and I think like the key secret is the combination. I mean, you mentioned discipline, but I think the absolute key secret in my view of speaking is doing. I mean, that is doing it a lot, but not just doing
Mm.
it, but then putting what we discussed before and then reflecting about it and getting feedback for it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why, I mean, just briefly before we discussed about organizations such as Toastmasters International, which is this more than 100 years old, I think now, right? I mean,
Mm. Yeah.
organization from the US where you just get together and you speak, and people say, oh, do you get a lot of training and so on? No, but you get speaking slots,
Practice.
you get practice, and every time you speak, and by doing that all the time, and then also in a positive atmosphere and getting ideas and suggestions, and you do it again and build it again, you really, really go very, very, very far and very practice. I love what Bill Gates once said on this one. I'm you realize one of my passions is quote hunting. You once said like people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And I really think that is super powerful, true for public speaking, because like can you turn around like this? No, but can you in a certain can you when you really put a lot like some practice in, and can you start very small, it really starts to move forward. And that was for me. I mean, I really during my studies I saw like, wow, this fascinating. You can really convey in a short amount of time. You can convey your thoughts, and then people maybe even vote for you or follow it. I had some very positive experience as well during some of my internships where I had a chance to present a project, and that was really a great time. And so I continued doing that, and especially for me, what I found very fascinating is a combination of what I call the European approach to speaking and the American approach to speaking.
What's the difference?
Well, it's very simplified and
Yeah.
so on. What I think like the European approach, if and it's very diverse as well, so it's super simplified.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Absolutely.
but I would say talks that have analytical depth, like content depth, where there's really like some great content depth in there with analysis and richer thoughts and so on. The downside of a too much of an analytical and content approach can be it can very soon be very boring,
Yeah. Mm.
and very deep and very like people can't follow. It's like the typical professor approach, so to speak. The American, very stereotypical, the American approach of speaking can sometimes be a very enthusiastic and storytelling and humor. Too much to the extreme, it can be great and engaging, but maybe sometimes a bit over the top, and maybe sometimes people say like, "Well, that's a bit shallow." Then on this, I mean, again,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and what I personally find what is really powerful is if you can at some stage combine the two, if you can somehow and that's for me is something that I strive to practice and see like, can I combine the two? Can I find maybe some study, some analytical depth in here, but also then what could then be a story that or a situation that maybe people will recognize that is humorous and so on. Can I combine something here? Can I combine a statistics with a story, so to speak,
Yeah.
on this? And that's what I've tried to do more and more and more. And organizations like Toastmasters, organizations like the Professional Speaker Association, but others. And then with a lot of practice and a lot of feedback. And I've kept Excel files on all of the feedbacks that I've received on speaking and trying to implement them always one time. Whenever I speak, I always try to do one thing differently that I got from a feedback before. I mean, I've done this for the past 20 years and I always try to do this. It's like I receive a feedback, I try to do it at least not everything different, but one thing different. And well,
Is
that's what I
there
continue trying to do.
what would you thank you. That's it looks like you're continuously improving yourself in every area. S-
Yeah, but
Or not?
I try. I'm not sure if I'm succeeding. A lot of feels like you enter new situations where it goes down, but I'm huge believer on this one. On this, like,
Mm.
what is the one thing that you can do differently tomorrow, and maybe trying to implement this. And in some fields that succeeds, in other fields it's a bit more challenging.
So my last question, Lars, because you're on, at the end of the podcast. What is it that you would like to do better tomorrow?
What is it that I like to do better tomorrow?
Uh-huh.
Ah, well, various different things. In speaking in general, it will be always. I'm always trying to see how can I make, and especially in times of AI, where people say like, "Oh, who needs PowerPoint? Who needs presenting?" and so on anymore. One of the things that I try to do better and really to do better is like really finding things that are relevant that create a human connection, and
Yeah.
and I always try to do that with two things, and one thing where I can get better on it, and where I try actively actually for the past month to get better. One is to find humorous situations, and what is and to share that with individuals, and to share like that common truth that people can, in a positive way, can laugh on, not about others, but like they recognize something in themselves and really have this humorous moment. That is something that is truly uniquely human in a moment, and can really help
Yeah.
move people forward. I try to find this, but I also try to find that other emotional connection. And here comes like what I try to do better is even more sharing and finding things like where I've learned something, different, where the feedback that I got that transformed me, like maybe also negative feedback, or things that can have growth, and really building that in. That's something that I'm constantly
Mm.
trying to have, but especially the latter part, which I constantly try to build in further into my keynotes. And that leads
Oh,
also to
beautiful.
the overall way. Yeah.
I love the one of the humor, and because it brings back the playful child in ourselves, and that's what we can all relate to. Our childhood, we were always laughing, and for most of us anyway. But I think every human being is still related with that happy child. So if you can trigger that and touch that one with just a humorous note, like you say, I think you bring people alive again, because we've lost, many of us have lost that beautiful inner child. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
humor is, I mean, we can have another full another hour on this, but humor is so important for all of us to find that, and to, it brings out like this yeah, the spirit and so on. Yeah,
The
it's great.
joy of life again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there one piece of inspiration, the last one, that you would like to give to our dear audience?
One last piece of inspiration.
Just what's
I'm
coming in, what's coming up in your head now?
um now I'm probably giving an advice that try to give myself as well, and really it's a reflect. No, but it's something that I always strive to be, and that is reflection. It's always reflecting maybe about, okay, we've talked a lot about self-reflection today, and it's really reflecting about, okay, take maybe a situation that didn't work so well, um, and then really ask yourself this one question. And personally find that a very powerful question, and which I try to do every day, but really asking, how would the person I would like to be do this thing that I'm about to do, or how would the person I would like to be do that challenging situation right now? How would that person approach?
Hmm.
How would the person I would like to be do that now? And what would he or she do? and
Very
and I found
powerful.
that just like a very, I always not that I succeed, far from it, like very often, but at least it can be like this beacon and direction that can be helpful in a sometimes as part of reflection. So that little card is also always with me, and sometimes it might give a little thought forward.
How would the person I want to be react on this
Do the
situation or
direct
act
in this
upon this
situation,
situation?
or do the things that I'm about to be.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Lars, for this beautiful conversation and fascinating and inspirational conversation. And also, thank you, dear listener. I hope this conversation has been able to inspire you because that is also my goal and my mission in life to bring inspiration from all over the world. Today it was Lars on self leadership. So I hope it's got inspired. And if you want to know more about podcasts on self leadership and inspirational leadership, just push the follow button, and then you will get many, many more episodes to come. So thank you, Lars. Thank you very much for listening to Studio Stijn. If you want more inspiration, just go to my website studiostain.com or go to the Spotify website, iTunes on inspirational leadership. You can also share this podcast with others who might benefit from listening to these inspirational talks. Thank you very much, great people.